it really made me think, I am not going to be in denial, I am going to be awake to this. And I think the issue with climate change is that often we don't deal with problems till they're staring us in the face. So this is the whole issue about prevention. In every sphere of tackling injustice, prevention, because you can't see it. And I think what I worry about is it's going to have to get a lot worse for really, really big actions to happen.
This is Jeeves, and welcome to How Can Faith Help Tackle Climate Change with Lucie Russell from Street Doctors and XR Jeeves. Lucie Russell, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a beautiful sunny day.
I know, a change.
And it's a Friday. So
It is a Friday. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and thank you for everything that you have done to tackle social inequalities. As a young person starting out on their journey of tackling these social inequalities, you are an inspiration.
Oh, thank you very much. Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You deserve all the praise that you can get. You are, of course, CEO of Street Doctors, which is a fantastic charity that empowers young people, doesn't look at them as the problem. Your words. I took that off a tweet that you did, I think it was yesterday. Yeah. However, today we are here to talk about climate change. We'll talk about your story, your sort of career progression later on in the podcast. But just to get straight into it, you've been heavily involved in tackling mental health issues, involved with young minds, poverty, prison reform. How do you fit climate change in your agenda of things to do?
Yeah, so they are all, it's a long career, and I've gone from one issue to another over many years. We won't talk about how many. And I suppose the thing that knits them all together is inequality and the absolute injustice of inequality. And climate change is really related to inequality, and it is a massive social justice issue in terms of our planet. So I suppose everything I've done today is about people, and this is about planet, but we all live on this planet. So it is an absolutely overriding issue. It is an emergency. We've got to act now. So I think that, I think my journey into climate change is probably quite representative of a lot of people. So people have been campaigning about climate change for years and years, and I knew about it, but I used to think it's not my thing. You know, I'm a people person. That's not really my thing. And I've been on a journey to become an activist around climate change, and that journey started with wandering past the XR April Rebellion on Waterloo Bridge, and then on a regular basis, walking past the place where Lambeth XR has its meetings, and I used to look through the window and think, what are they all doing in there? And then reading more and more about it. And then when the October Rebellion came around, I'd got to the point where I just felt like I couldn't not do something. I just felt driven, like I've always felt driven by issues. And it was actually listening to a climate scientist called Dr. Emily Grossman, who I've heard speak a number of times. And what she talks about are the facts. She's a scientist. You know, this isn't emotion, this is fact. And when I heard her talking, I just started thinking, right, okay, either everyone else is in denial or she's wrong, and all these other thousands of scientists are wrong. And it really made me think, I am not going to be in denial, I am going to be awake to this. And I think the issue with climate change is that often we don't deal with problems till they're staring us in the face. So this is the whole issue about prevention. In every sphere of tackling injustice, prevention, because you can't see it. And I think what I worry about is it's going to have to get a lot worse for really, really big actions to happen, because people do live in a bit of denial and they can't see it. When you can't see it, it's not so tangible. So we can't see it so much in this country. You know, people say, oh, you know, it was warm in 1933 or 1973, is no different. And that worries me about every injustice I've ever tackled. It's like, how bad does it actually need to get?
Why do you think it is that only now it's really coming into public opinion, really front page of the news, mobilisation in terms of Greta Thunberg and what she's done with the youth movement? Why do you think that it's only coming to the stage right now?
Because it's about a critical mass. So I think with anything, if you take any injustice, you know, the Black Civil Rights Movement, anti-apartheid movement, the women's movement, it always starts with a few people who are thinking very strategically, who work really hard, and then that mass starts to gather, and then you get moments. So you get moments where, I mean, Greta Thunberg, well, she's more than a moment, she's a powerhouse, but, you know, a young girl devoting her life to this. And I think also with Extinction Rebellion, what's been interesting about them is what we saw in the last uprising was people in their 90s being arrested, you know, mothers, fathers, doctors, rabbis, vicars. You know, this is about all of us, and I think it's about that critical mass gathering pace. And I think even though it is staring us in the face, there's enough information now for people to start thinking, actually, this is real. This isn't a debate anymore. This is a reality.
Could we use, like you said, rabbis got involved. It was a cross-generational issue that everyone could unite behind.
Yeah.
Do you think that we could use this as a way, thinking about faith institutions, faiths, to get everyone together to tackle this common issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think faith communities are really, really important to movements because, first of all, faith communities are able to hook people in from their communities in a way that possibly the movement they're joining would struggle with. And I think that also faith communities have a kind of religious vocabulary and rituals and ways of dealing with the issue. So I think with climate change, it is very emotional. The more you get into it, the more it's actually really awful and really upsetting. And what's really important about faith communities is they can support those feelings, they can support hearts and minds as well as heads. And I think they have a role in normalising an issue. So with climate change, with Extinction Rebellion, for example, there are perceptions about them, and if faith communities join, en masse, then it is kind of normalising it. It's saying we can all be a part of it. It isn't a niche group, and communities are really powerful. Communities have so much power. So faith communities have a massive role to play, and it's wonderful how integrated they are in this climate change movement. There was a faith bridge during the October Rebellion, full of all the different faiths.
I'm so intrigued about how, I mean, you know as well, being CEO of a fantastic charity, how strategically XR can mobilise, organise. How hard is it to make sure that everyone stays in line?
Yeah, so I think what is fascinating about XR is it's a social movement. Social movements are decentralised. There's no command and control. Yeah. I think that is fascinating, and I know there are people studying XR as a really interesting example of a social movement. You know, the downsides of a social movement are, everybody's organising. So with XR, everyone's organising in groups. So you're in an affinity group, or you're with, a faith group, and during the October Rebellion, which I was a part of, it was. I mean, and I think most XR people will say it was madness. Yeah. There was so many things you could be doing, so many different social media channels, and different apps that were being used, and at times I kept thinking, I just want someone to tell me what to do. But the upside of a social movement is ownership. We all own it. We all play a part. We are all responsible. And it means it's nimble, it's flexible. And what we don't want is more command and control, because that's what we're used to. And we know for most of it, it doesn't work. For many people, it alienates us. So I think, XR are very open about the fact, they're grappling with this. They're learning as they go along. They're not going to get everything right. But, if you look at change and how change happens, it is about movements of people, and movements of people work best when they're working locally and making their own decisions and doing their own actions. But I think it's a constant tension and a constant balance, but I think it's doing brilliantly so far.
There's definitely power and freedom, like you're saying, 100%. If it's your choice, you're doing it. And I think there is a bit of a misconception, because people think, look, if you join XR, you're going to get arrested for doing that or another. And I spoke to a girl, and she was saying, look, I just went there one time. There was spoken word artists. There were people just having fun, like you don't necessarily have to go there and get arrested. And that's
so I think this is a really important point, and I think especially for everyone really, and for faith communities. I mean, I can't get arrested. I run a charity. I have no intention of getting arrested. But there are so many other roles, so many other support roles. You can support arrestees. You can go to protests. Like your friend said, you can. There's music, there's dancing, there's costumes, I've been a steward on a number of things, and that's felt like I'm playing, I want to do my part, I want to play my part. Mm-hmm. So that's felt right for me. So there's a role for everybody in terms of what feels right for them, and you really don't have to be arrested. If you see it as a kind of pyramid, being arrested is about civil disobedience. It is about standing up and saying, I will not stand for this. But underneath that, the top of the pyramid, there are a plethora of other things you could be doing. So I helped in the kitchen during the rebellion, cooking food. I helped organise an affinity group action. And, I even sat in the road at Trafalgar Square. But all you do, well, you have to be very careful, but, if it looks like there's arrests about to happen, you just stand up and you walk away. The police aren't just grabbing anybody. It's quite, it's a decision that you make. But you really, message to everyone who's listening, you really do not have to be arrested. That's one thing, one of many things you can do.
Where does sort of climate, I mentioned before with mental health, poverty, prison reform, climate change, now you're working with street doctors. Where does climate change fit in your list of priorities?
I'd say it's, youth violence, which is what Street Doctors is tackling, and climate change are my two priorities at the moment.
At the moment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can't see those changing for the time being.
But that's the thing about climate change, because I was speaking as well, and they were saying we have to change every single aspect of our society. So with XR, how hard is it to, you go through a protest and then you have this sort of quiet period. Yeah. How hard is it to keep that message flowing through the quiet period?
It's a really interesting one. I think, I went to some of the debriefs after the rebellion, and, people were absolutely exhausted. And actually mentally and physically needed a rest. It is a rejuvenative culture. That's very important tenet of XR. But then it does feel like, well, what should we do now? We're not doing anything. We've got to do something. So the hunger strikes are going on at the moment outside the party political headquarters. And they're really making a difference. It's just that they're not getting much publicity. There's a climate strike today. There's all the hustings that have been going on, the climate hustings. So there are things to be doing, but, we are building up to the festive period and people do have other things to do. And I think it's very much about conserving energy and proper strategic planning. But, there's a strike today, there's a school strike today. So there are, and we will support all those things. It isn't like we only do XR things. I'll do anything which is about climate change. But there's also what you can do individually in your daily life. So, for me, it's about we've all got to start consuming less. We all consume so much, especially in kind of capitalist societies. We can all consume less, and we have to teach our children to consume less. We can all recycle and recycle meaningfully. And I often think about recycling. It's a bit of a pain because, you're out and, you get a sandwich and it's wrapped in plastic and then there's nowhere to put it, or you've got some food waste and you have to put it in your bag and take it home because you've got some recycling facilities, and that is a pain. But it's every little action has a reaction. So it is things like, don't keep buying new clothes. We don't need to keep buying new clothes because shipping, is a massive polluter. We can eat less meat or not eat meat. We can fly less. We can drive less. Why, if we live in capital cities, do we actually need to drive? So we can all do our bits, even in gaps in activity.
How can faith help with this individual responsibility? How do you think faith communities can help put this message forward?
Yeah, in Judaism, we have a phrase, tikkun olam, which is about repairing the world, and lador vador is generation to generation. Judaism for me is about social action. I don't understand how you can be Jewish and not be socially conscious, and the same with every other religion. It's about being a good person. It's about caring about the world. It's about caring about the planet. All religions have that teaching embedded in it. So I think, to me, it's an intrinsic part of having faith. That faith is about social action. That faith is about caring about those who are less fortunate than you, caring about this beautiful planet that we are destroying, and how can we do that? That planet was, well, whatever you think, whether it just happened or whether there is a higher power, and even that higher power is invested in you, it is our duty. We must be driven by action to make the world a fairer, better place and protect our world.
I love how you put it, where you say religions encourage you to be a good person intrinsically, and to do that, maybe you should tackle more social inequalities. Has that been a motivation for you throughout your life?
Yeah, all my life.
All your life?
All my life, yeah. I couldn't not do what I do. I can't imagine doing anything that wasn't about doing what I can to change the issue that I'm working on. I'm driven by that. I think it actually started around the time when I was preparing to be bat mitzvahed, and where the synagogue where my family was based, our rabbi was Rabbi Tony Bayfield, who is a great authority on Judaism, Reform Judaism. Has just written a book called Being Jewish Today. And we did a lot of work on our bar mitzvah classes about social injustice, about the Holocaust, about what our responsibility was as young people. I remember when I did my bat mitzvah, Tony said, you include what you want to include. And I remember including a couple of Leonard Cohen poems, his more sort of political stuff. Mm-hmm. And from there, I was 15, 16 when I did that. And that was it. That's just who I am. It's my essence. It's everything about me. I just couldn't do anything else. It's why am I on the earth? I'm on the earth to make the world a better place. And that's what we should all be on the earth for. But sometimes it's harder for some people. There is an element of privilege about being able to spend your life making the world a better place.
Of course. I might be putting you on the spot a little bit here, but so do you believe in the reform? So you are a reform Jew?
Well, what am I? I am Jewish, so I identify myself as Jewish. Yeah. For me, Judaism is a cultural thing, as well as a political thing, as with a small p. I'd say I'm more the liberal end. I don't go to synagogue. I'm not a member of a synagogue. I keep thinking I really should be, but it's about fitting everything in. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really proud to be part of XR Jews, because I'm identifying myself as Jewish. I think, what we're doing as XR Jews is bringing a Jewish voice to XR. And that means I'm expressing my Judaism again, which I'm really pleased about. But I grapple with issues about faith and also about tribes. My partner is very anti-religious, and and sometimes I do think, is he right that we should all just be good people? We should all just be one, and how these tribes have just caused so much strife. But it's in my soul. Judaism's in my soul, and I think we actually have a duty on behalf of all the Jewish people that have suffered to stand up and say we're Jewish and fight anti-Semitism and support every other faith and every other marginalised group.
So do you think that religions, even Orthodox ones, are compatible with these sort of modern day issues like climate change, like, I don't know, we had a podcast about AI. Do you think that they are up to the challenge of being integrated into a society where we take these things into account?
Well, I think that's up to them to answer.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, I think there needs to be some development, some evolution, because I think in the end they will alienate their supporters because we all live in this modern world. But I think that, for orthodox elements of religions, what they're doing is trying to preserve those traditions and what they believe are the right ways of living your life. So I don't think it's not going to work to say to those people, you need to be different, you're not integrated enough. It's not for me, but I get it. I've been to Israel, I've lived with Orthodox groups in Israel. I can really see why it would be a choice, but it's not my choice. But I think that's for them to look at the world they live in, what they should be caring about and responsible for, and listen to what the people in their communities and outside their communities are saying. There should be listening mode.
That's interesting. You just mentioned briefly about your trip to Israel. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I've been to Israel a few times. I've lived on a number of different kibbutzes. I travelled a lot. I was on a journey. I was in my 20s. I was trying to find myself.
Finding yourself.
Yeah, I was trying to find myself, along with all the other volunteers in all the kibbutzes. I travelled around. I ended up in Jerusalem. I spent a bit of time with the Orthodox community, who are very, very welcoming. I mean, one of their roles is to convert people. And I found it very attractive, but I just kept thinking, hang on, this is a very enclosed world. And it really is about saying, I don't want to be a part of that wider world. And ultimately, that wasn't for me. But it's a beautiful, amazing place.
I'm quite interested in how you went to Israel as well in your 20s, because not enough... I mean, I hear people who are in their 20s, they go interrailing.
Yeah.
Or they go to Thailand, or they go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
But why did you choose Israel? Was it because of your Jewish background?
Yeah, it's because of my Jewish background. It was also easier to go to Israel and become a kibbutz volunteer than it is now, because I was actually looking for my son, because I think it'd be good for him to go. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't think it's as open as it was. I mean, the volunteers I lived with were from all over the world, and they were every single faith. When I looked at it, it looked like it had got harder, which I think is a real shame, but I don't know the reasons.
We'll stay away from
we'll
stay away from the politics. So now to move on, because we moved a little bit. So maybe humanity's self-interested.
Yeah.
Now, throughout your career, you've done a lot to help humanity. But have you sort of accepted that humanity is self-interested, or have you been an optimist when it comes to looking at humanity and human nature?
So it's never made me pessimistic. Okay. I mean, all the issues that I've dealt with. I mean, I spent 10 years working with homeless people as well, as one of the founders of the Big Issue. Yeah. If I look at all the issues that I've dealt with, homelessness, criminal justice, mental health, youth violence, I wouldn't say any of those issues have actually got much better. In fact, some of them have got worse. Despite all the government promises and we're going to do this and we're going to invest this, but that should never mean you give up. You can't give up. You just can't do that. I know people who've said humans are so destructive and so actually unpleasant that they deserve this and the end of this world. And actually, let's be clear, this world will carry on. It's just that we won't exist anymore. We talk about the next extinction, and I just can't go with that. So yes, I suppose I am an optimist. I'm a fighter. I'm not giving up. I never give up. I'm not giving up.
I feel like it's that perseverance which I find so inspiring as well, how you have dedicated all your life and not necessarily just focused on one issue. Because there are so many issues, and maybe that's how I don't know, but from the outside, that's how you keep your motivation. Because rather than just focusing on one issue, you've like tackled 4 or 5 throughout your career.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. Everything is connected.
Yeah.
I might have jumped from one issue to another, and yes, it is 4 or 5. I do sometimes think, well, maybe I should just stayed with one issue. Maybe I shouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
But then I think, but it's all connected. Homelessness, mental health, criminal justice, youth violence, poverty. We are talking about the same things. We're basically talking about inequality. So actually, I don't think I have jumped issues in a way, because the pinnacle is the problem. These are all symptoms of the problem. But I think, if you devote your life to one issue, or you do what I've done and devote your life to a number of issues, there's no right way of doing it. You do what feels right for you. When I moved from homelessness to criminal justice, I knew John Lord Bird, who I worked with as the founder, said to me, you're still in the race, but you've just changed horses. Yeah. So, I've jumped from one horse to another.
That's a good way of putting it,
Yeah.
No, definitely. I think that also when you look at the issues that you have tackled, I don't think people do put those 2 and 2 together, like when homelessness and mental health. Sometimes the causes of homelessness our mental health.
Yeah,
but people don't put those two things together, and people do treat them separately, and maybe that is another misconception.
Well, homelessness, mental health causes homelessness, and homelessness causes mental health problems. So they're absolutely tangled up with each other. I think people do, they do think single issue wise, but that's because it's so complicated. I mean, I don't blame them. But I think the fact that seeing it as we are all connected, it is all connected, is very helpful, because then you can take a systematic approach. It's about systems. This is about systems change, and climate change is about systems change.
Sorry, just to stay on the topic of you might get a bit boring. It might get a bit boring. Keep talking about yourself. But what stopped you from going to government and go in that area? Why did you stay with the activists? Why did you stay with keeping a foot out of that door of government?
Because I would have felt stifled in government, and government has many agendas other than the agenda of fighting inequality. And if you look at the governments get engulfed in all sorts of messes, and I think it means it's much harder to actually make change. So, I mean, what I love the most is frontline work, running. I mean, I love running Street Doctors. It's a frontline organisation. We're teaching life-saving skills to young people at risk of youth violence, so they can become part of the solution, not just seen as part of the problem. That's very frontline. After our sessions, young people at risk will know what to do if someone has been stabbed, and they can save a life, and that's so empowering. And I think I would have just felt very constricted in government. I don't think it wouldn't work for me. It works for loads of people. Wouldn't work for me.
So now, just to finish off, you've said throughout the podcast, tackling social inequalities is your motivation. Has money never swayed you? Have you never thought, no, never?
Well, I'm not motivated by money. I mean, I need money to live on.
But even in this material world, you see all these things. You've never thought, I want that lifestyle.
Never. I find it a bit nauseating, to be honest. I find it fascinating. I mean, just walking here, I just walked past Claridge's Hotel in London, and I was thinking, what are they all doing? All those people with all that money. And then I walked past a shop that sells luxury yachts. I just find it really unpleasant, and I've never. I don't need anything. What I need is love and care. And I read once that the two most important things in life are intimacy and meaningful occupation. If you've got those two things, why do you need all those other things? And I think people have all those other things because they don't have those things. And I think that's what we should all be. We need to find ways of people being able to find intimacy and meaningful occupation, because I think they're the kind of meaning of life, really. And all this rubbish, all this stuff that we don't need, these material things, maybe they will start to vanish. I mean, this is very idealistic.
I think that is a perfect way to finish. Thank you, Lucie, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
How did you find it?
Brilliant. Really good.
So that was my conversation with Lucie Russell. You can follow Lucie on Twitter at LucieRussell12. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Make sure you catch the next podcast with Tim Gee on how can faith help promote peace, and that'll be coming out soon. The views expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of Faith Forum for London or Street Doctors.